folks. Let's have a discussion. I dug into a rabbit hole last night that was holy cow. After doing our article yesterday on the money system, I started digging a little deeper, and what was interesting is a term came up, and it led me to another term, and lo and behold, I stumbled across the Khazarian Mafia. Now, I'd heard of them one other time, and it was worth investigating, but it's interesting to learn that these folks have been around a long time. So the curtain's now being pulled back to fully expose the Khazarian Mafia and its plan to infiltrate, tyrannize the whole world, and eradicate all Abrahamic religions, consider that Torah, the Bible, Islam, and only allow their Babylonian Talmudism, also known as Luciferianism, Satanism, or, as we read about it in the Bible, ancient Baal worship. So this is the root of these folks, and you're going to be very, very surprised as to where they are. So let's take a look here. So the history of the Kazarians, specifically the Khazarian Mafia, and it's going to be in this article, and the link will be provided. They're the world's largest organized crime syndicate that the Khazarian oligarchy morphed into by their deployment of money magic, known as completely removed from all the history books. But the money magic is something we know quite well. This is and there's a link here. You can jump there. Let's see if I can go there real quick. But this gives you all the details, all the history on money magic, which we're not going to go into today. But this, as you notice, here's the bankers that challenged it. And we all know what happened to them. So it's definitely interesting, but the Khazarian oligarchy are the ones that are behind this. The present day KM knows that it can't operate or exist without abject secrecy, and therefore they've spent a lot of time and money to make sure they're wiped from all the history books. The authors of the article that helped pull this together have done their best to resurrect the lost knowledge. And since we have the internet, this is our new Gutenberg press, and we're going to get this out to everybody that we possibly can. So a lot of the history is secret, so please excuse any minor inaccuracies or errors. They're unintentional, and they're due to digging out the true history of the Khazarians and the Mafia. So Mike Harris connected the dots and made the actual discovery of the presence of the Khazarian Mafia's secret history and their blood oath to take revenge on Russia for helping the Americans win not only the Revolutionary War, but the Civil War, as well as the wars that helped sustain our union. At the Syrian Conference on Combating Terrorism 8 years ago, in the keynote address, for the first time ever, world terrorism is actually due to a large international organized crime syndicate that's associated with the Zionists in Israel. So don't confuse that with the people, but these are those in power, much like we have here in America, that have sold out and are just in it for the money. So there's actual Jews, that's Jesus and the tribe of Judah, and fake Jews, which are those that are part of this crime syndicate. So when this happened, the disclosure sent shockwaves all over the conference and almost instantly around the world. Gordon Duff asked President Putin to release the Russian intel he had that would expose 300 traitors in our Congress for their serious serial felonies and statutory espionage on behalf of the Khazarian Mafia. So, and against America and many Middle East nations. The key thing to take away is we now know that the Khazarian Mafia is waging a secret war against America and Americans by the use of false flag, Gladio-style terrorism, and via the illegal and unconstitutional Federal Reserve System, the IRS, the FBI, yeah, that's for real as well, FEMA, Homeland Security, and the TSA. We know for certain that the KM was responsible for deploying an inside job, Gladio-style false flag attack on 911, as well as the Oklahoma City Murrah building bombing on April 19th of 95. The history here of the mafia, I'm not going to dig into, but this goes all the way back to 2nd century. And what's interesting is if you spend time in reading on this, you're going to read about the ancient occult arts that were brought in from Babylon and that have been utilized all along the way to keep things moving for them. So do study that, take time, but we fast forward to somewhere around 1300, and King Charles, the Khazarian Mafia invaded England after they had been expelled for hundreds of years. And when they did so, they hired Oliver Cromwell to murder King Charles I and make England safe to do their things again, their banking. This began the English Civil Wars for nearly a decade and resulted in regicide of the royal family and hundreds of actual English nobility. That's how the city of London was set up as the banking capital of Europe and launched the beginning of the British Empire. So that's where it began. And, you know, check this out. So Evelyn de Rothschild poking his finger into Prince Charles. Do you think that would happen unless he had the power? So keep that in mind. The Khazarian Mafia made a point of taking over world banking using what's called Babylonian black magic. And there's that link above. Take time and read up on that. But the Babylonian money magic, or the secret art of making money from nothing using the power of usury to accumulate interest, we know that is fiat currency today. All of this is based on their arts of Babylonian money magic, and this involved the substitution of paper credit certificates for gold and silver deposits. Does that sound familiar? We talked about that in yesterday's Why the Banks Have to Change video. So this allowed travelers to travel with their money in a form that offered easy replacement as opposed to being stolen physical gold and silver. But it's also interesting how that very problem that was started by the Khazarians was also, they provided the solution. So eventually the Khazarian king and his small surrounding court infiltrated Germany with a group that chose the name the Bowers of Germany to represent them and carry on their Baal-powered system of evil. The Bowers of the Red Shield, which represented their secret blood-based child sacrifices, changed their name to Rothschild, aka Child of the Rock, Satan. So the Rothschilds were the frontmen of the Khazarian Mafia, and they hijacked British banking and then the whole nation of England. So keep that in mind. What the first thing that they did, they learned that they could easily influence wars, and they could loan money and make money from the victors and the losers to both sides on a war. Well, the other thing they did is when Napoleon had finally lost the war, they quickly got back to Britain and said Napoleon won. By doing that, people quickly sold out and they snapped up everything at pennies on the dollar. So these folks will do anything they can to manipulate the truth and make money on it. So we quoted this yesterday, and it's worth restating. I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply. That was Nathan Rothschild. So keep that in mind. This has been their goal from the very beginning. So they set up private fiat banking that specialized in making counterfeit money from nothing, charging usury to the British people, usury being interest. They claimed to be insiders, that such technology and secret money power was provided to them, And because of their frequent child sacrifices and rituals, that's how they got this knowledge. Once they had infiltrated and hijacked the British banking system, they interbred with the royals, infiltrated and completely hijacked all of England and its major institutions. And some experts actually believe the Rothschilds genocided all of the royal family members by staging secretly managed illicit and adulterous breedings with their own Khazarian men in order to replace the royals with their pretenders to the throne. So think about this when you think about the Queen of England. She's actually a descendant of the Rothschilds. She's not pure blood by any means. The Khazarian Mafia is also looking to remove anybody that is ruling under the right of God Almighty. So they detest any kings who rule under the authority of God. So think about 45. 45 is exactly the type of person they want removed. And that's why when the election was manipulated back in 2020, rather than carry out a long public battle, he took it underground, and things have been going that way ever since. In the 1600s, that the Khazarian Mafia murdered the royals, put their own fakes in. In the 1700s, they did the same to the French royals. And then right before World War I, they did the same to the Austrian Archduke. So again, you look at all of these people and the German royals, and then ultimately the Chinese royals and the Japanese ruler, they took over all these folks over the last 200 years. The Khazarian Mafia has such intense hatred of anyone who professes faith in anyone but their own god Baal, which we know as Satan, and that has motivated him to murder kings and royalty. They have done the same with American presidents, and we saw the 4 that were in that other website. So running sophisticated operations to disempower or kill them. So as it says here, you know, if they don't disempower them, they will kill them. And that's exactly what they do. And it's interesting. We have the history with the attempt on Reagan as well. So once they figured out how to manage the money system, they also figured out that creating narcotics trafficking was a quick way to make more money. So they completely subjugated the nation of China by feeding them Turkish opium. And that's how they gained control over there. And that's also why when the Communist Party took over, they were absolutely staunchly opposed to a lot of the manipulation and the murder that these folks were famous for. Additionally, we look at the slave trade. The Rothschilds started the international slave trade. This is an enterprise that viewed kidnapped humans as animals. So the Rothschilds' next project was strictly doing that, selling kidnapped slaves. So they also learned that by starting wars and doubling their money on both sides, that was a quick way to manipulate things. When things started to spread in the United States with our Revolutionary War, they funded both sides. But when they expected Britain to win, and ultimately the fact that Russia stepped in and helped them, they swore a revenge on the colonists and the Russians. So the Russians have been at opposition with the Khazarian Mafia. So in order for them to maintain their control on America, since they lost it with Britain losing the war, they postured setting up the central bank in America. Now, we resisted that numerous times, and we had presidents like Andrew Jackson who, on his tombstone, it says, "I killed the bank." So, you know, literally, the bankers have been trying again and again and again, and it wasn't until 1913 that Rothschild succeeded in getting their bank here, and we know that as the Federal Reserve. So it was a crooked politician, and yes, he was GOP, and he got Congress to pass it on Christmas Eve without the required quorum, so it was illegal. The act was then signed by a crooked president, Woodrow Wilson, who was a traitor to America, like the members of Congress who voted for it. Additionally, they put an unconstitutional tax system in place. they instantiated the IRS at this point in time. So now you've got money that is manipulated and controlled, and usury is being charged on the people that use it. And then we have the IRS that illegally taxes the people. All of this was started by the Khazarian Mafia. So it's easy for them to do this. The thing that we have to realize is the IRS is a private collection agency incorporated in Puerto Rico, not even in the continental United States. And the thing that shocked me in this research was they also set up the FBI. Think about that. The Khazarian Mafia set up the FBI so that they could cover up their child sacrifices, the pedophile networks, and to serve as getting covert intel on their behalf. There is no charter for the FBI, according to the Library of Congress, and it has no right to exist or issue paychecks. So think about that. Last reports prior to the election was FBI headquarters in D.C. was boarded up. So if that's still the case today, it would be great to get pictures, folks. If that's true, then again, that's the rooting out of the Khazarian Mafia here in America, which is great. The Rothschild Mafia also set up the Bolshevik Revolution. Go do some reading on that. But the Bolsheviks were actually created and deployed by the Mafia, as they had an extensive background and an axe to grind with the Russian people. So that to me was another eye-opener. So it was a well-planned, savage, and inhuman bloodletting that stunned the world. The Bolsheviks were unleashed in full fury, and to this day, it is still one of the worst bloody revolutions that was there. They also tried to prevent themselves from being exposed by pretending to be Jews. So the Rothschild Mafia created this master plan to control all of Judaism and mind control those that follow it. So they hijacked it, patterned a lot of it off of Talmudism, which is where you get gematria and all the other nonsense that is controlled by that. And it's gained control over banking and Wall Street professions in general, Congress, the major mass media, and along with most wealth and economic means of success. So in this manner, the Rothschilds hijacked Judaism. So their financing of the Israeli Knesset and construction of it using the Freemason occult architecture displayed their commitment to the occult and the Babylonian Talmudism and all the evil that accompanies it, including child sacrifice. And this is still done to this very day. They set up the New World Order system, calling it Zionism, which taught and inculcated susceptible Judaics with a paranoid group delusion of racial superiority, which assumed that all Gentiles were intent on mass murdering all Judaics. So that's a huge lie. So again, that's very sad to see, but it's true. What's worse is Netanyahu. So Bibi is actually part of this. So it's important to do your research on this, but you can see from the basis of World War II, they set things up and they continued sacrificing to continue their New World Order. But when Hitler set up his own bank and created his own way of dealing with things, he then became the enemy, and that's why they allowed his fall. So he had his own form of that was free of usury and beneficial to the working class. A couple of world leaders have done this, and what has happened? We've gone in, the United States, supported by the Khazarian Mafia, and we've murdered and annihilated those peoples. So we see the same thing in the war against Islam, because Islam forbids usury. That's why Israel is so vocal and aggressive about destroying Islamic people. So it's not Israel in general, it's the Zionists. So we have to be very aware there's a big difference. So, and you know, I'm a professing first century believer of the Messiah. So I see a massive difference between the Zionists and Israel in general. So Congress has been bribed continually to put people in place. So whether it's for the First World War, whether it's for the Second World War, but ultimately, once we've completed these things, we then take those people, and if you've never read up on Operation Paperclip, this is the excuse to bring all the Nazi scientists and mind control experts to America. And that's how we set up our spying and espionage system. So we are definitely not with clean hands here in America. A lot of these people are run and controlled by this, the Rothschilds Mafia. So the Khazarian Mafia set up Nazi work camps as a pretext to later manipulate the Allies into granting them their own private colony in Palestine. That's worth looking into as well. By doing so, the truth of the matter is they set up these work camps to actually make huge profits and ran the work camps and supplied the Nazi war machine. So it was a huge pretext that they did it under, and the reality is they did it to make more money. So again, Rothschilds Mafia gained their own private homeland in 1947. So everybody says, oh, that's the reestablishment of the nation of Israel. The reality is this is an establishment for the Khazarian Mafia, and the nation of Israel just benefits as a result. And it's very unlikely that most people know that they're being manipulated by these folks. So again, they keep changing and hijacking things. So one of the things they did here in America is they worked hard to hijack Freemasonry and its secret offshoots. And in doing so, they inducted top members into the pedophile network and child sacrifice rituals. And we've seen a number of documentaries on this. So keep that in mind. And then members of Congress are then inducted into the secret satanic network by giving them special power. If you've ever seen Nancy Pelosi's little sickle that she wears on her lapel, especially back when Trump was in office, this was her way of invoking her power by the dark arts trying against him. Unfortunately, she didn't win, and we're seeing the results of that. So again, these folks are here just to manipulate and make money in America. They then changed the education system. I've actually done articles on fluoride, so they dumbed down America by preventing and providing fluorides and vaccines that dumb down children and create huge numbers of chronic health problems. If you read through this, I'm not going to speak to it in the video or it'll get banned, but it's important to realize there are a number of things that have been done to us that these guys are all behind. So ultimately, this is part of the mass way of controlling in major mass media people and what's going on. So the Khazarian Mafia chieftains have this vocal Israel first dual citizens that lived in America. But as the disclosures come out, we're going to find out that not only was the Mossad and others involved in 9/11, but those Zionists are responsible for what happened to America. So keep that in mind and do your research as well. There are a number of people that did investigation on what was called Able Danger, which was that attack. And 35 of those investigators who were investigating and tracking the Israeli theft of decommissioned Davy Crockett nuclear pits out of the back door of Texas were murdered by the Tomahawk hit when it hit the Pentagon. So again, this is one of those things to keep in mind. The Mossad used urban moving systems to transport mini nukes all over the place. So keep that in mind. And they were stored initially in the Israeli embassy in New York City. So there are, and at this point in time, it is unknown how many are still out there. And this is something I'd heard about over a decade ago. 25 nukes in major American cities as well as cities in Europe so that they could maintain blackmail and control. These are the mini nukes. So those are there, and ultimately, unless they have all been removed, we still stand in danger. So when people say, when can we be done with this movie and when can we be done with these things, until those things have been disarmed and removed, a lot of this still has to operate in the dark. The other thing to look at here is DHS was created specifically to be run by dual citizens and perverts. So go look at the people that are involved there. Michael Chertoff, who was the criminal mastermind that set up DHS, along with the former head of the East German Stasi, so the secret police, Marcus Wolf. So he was hired as a special consultant. The Rothschild Mafia never thought they would get exposed for 911, but they made a very serious mistake. So very soon, people are going to find out what happened here and what their role was in this. So ultimately, Russia is now attacking their stronghold in Ukraine. So they have leaked a lot of information about the labs, the nukes, and everything else, and this can't be stopped. So a number of Russians in the military high command and the highest positions of leadership in Russia realized that it's the same organized crime cabal that organized the Khazarians and the Bolsheviks to mass murder 100 million innocent Russians. And these guys want payback, and that's why Russia is headed into Ukraine. That's why we're making sure the banksters will be put out of business, which will decapitate the mafia from its endless counterfeit money supply, the Babylonian magic money. This is why the BRICS Development Bank was created. So do some research on that. That's another one to dig into. And we're doing away with the U.S. petrodollar. So the mainstream media is failing. Most Americans no longer get their news that way. So spread this far and wide and make sure people are aware of the depth of the corruption and where it goes. The military high command knows that Bibi Netanyahu ordered 911 on behalf of the mafia. So their days of power is limited. Their days of safe houses are limited. And ultimately, we are closing the doors on a lot of these things, including MI6, which is corrupt in Britain. So that's got to go as well. So some last notes. There's some interesting things. The mafia chieftains, which run most of the city of London, the banking city, they're known as Gog and Magog, which is interesting. Many historians believe that's the secret name of Russia, but it's not. It's the secret name of the top Khazarian Mafia, and apparently represents where they originally came from. So these folks are digging them out, and they will be removed and eradicated. It's unknown if a significant number of these stolen nicks have already been recovered. So it's important that we keep everything ongoing, and that we have to stay awake. And there's definitely at least one more false flag attack somewhere in the bucket. So keep that in mind. So the rest of the Khazarian Mafia can be determined by you. So we need to dig into and share this story with your family and friends. Make it viral. Be clear about this. Unless we expose them, they will continue forever. So it's hard. That's why they bought up the mainstream media, and they keep publishing their nonsense. That's why they've taken over colleges and universities so that they can keep people from thinking logically. The big question is, was the true cause of the leaders of this done by nature or nurture? So some believe it's a gross parasitism and inclination to mass murder. I, for one, believe that it's the offshoot of the children of the Nephilim. Some believe it's the bloodline of Cain. I don't believe that. And I want to give credit where credit's due. Mike Harris wrote the bulk of this article, but it's important that we spread the word. There's also a bonus video here that I won't play right now, but David Icke actually exposes this. And you can participate in the global efforts to cripple the deep state by getting off of big pharma. So today we saw the delisting of Pfizer. That's a start. And they're going out of business. So what you can do is study the ancient ways, find ways to heal yourself using the ancient models, but don't pay big pharma for what you need. So with all of that in mind, I wish you all peace. Spread the word wherever you can.